Hi, McCartney fans, and welcome to another edition of Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. I'm one of your two co-hosts, Tom Hunyadi, and with me, as always, is my partner in crime and my backwards traveler. He is Andy Nichols. Andy, what's going on, my friend?
Morning, Tom. Good morning, and excited to be here for episode 96 with a great
96,
with a
yes,
with a great
absolutely.
guest today.
Yes, absolutely. Today, as you can see, we have ourselves a music journalist legend. He has written for New Musical Express, and he's also written for Q, Mojo, and Time Out, just to name a few. He's also written over a dozen books, including Bob Marley, The Untold Story, Jimmy Page, The Definitive Biography, and also this one, which we'll be talking about a little bit later as well. It's called McCartney, The Definitive Biography, not to be confused with the other Chris's book, The Definitive Biography from 1984. But we have with us Chris Salewicz. Chris, how are you doing? Thank you for being here.
Salewicz, we like to do it.
Salewicz, thank you. I was practicing all night last night, Salewicz, and then now I'm
No, very happy to be here. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. It's a sunny afternoon here in London.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Before we get started into all your McCartney stuff, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Give us, up till maybe you started writing the McCartney book. Talk to us a little bit about your journalist experience up to that time.
Okay. Well, really, I just left the NME at that point. Well, about 3 years probably before I started writing it. Okay. And I worked for the NME from 74 to 81. I'd done English literature at university with the intention of becoming a journalist, but then realizing that I didn't really want to work for kind of I mean the traditional. In the end, I try and get the NME, the New Musical Express, was coming up as a kind of very happening publication in the mid-70s, and I wanted to be identified with them. They seemed to give you a lot of space to write. It was, you could write in a fairly subjective manner. At that point, I was very influenced by what Tom would call the new journalism. And in fact, I'd actually been turned on to the whole idea of writing, of doing journalism through reading the Tom Wolfe articles, which were published in the Daily Telegraph, which came out on Fridays, and there were his articles about the new London. And we'd get those in our a school library, and we had a free period on Friday mornings. So I read all. Oh, this is fantastic! I didn't realize you could do it like this. This is a whole new way of looking at things. And then the sort of style of writing in Rolling Stone or underground press here, like International Times, really influenced me. So. That's why, really, in the end, I wanted to write for the NME. I'd written for a magazine called Letter, sort of intelligent monthly, and had worked on Time Out, but I was still doing stuff in Time Out, etc. But that's how I came to this, and I was actually in New York. I was doing a piece for the Sunday Times magazine about who'd just done a film with Harvey Keitel called, I can't remember what it's called actually. And I was writing a piece for, I can't remember the title. I was writing a piece for the Sunday Times about this, and met my first agent, a woman called Karen Moline, and I'd already written a book about the Pretenders. Okay. And essentially, we got a deal to write a book about Paul McCartney for St. Martin's Press in New York, in America.
Okay, so you already
had this came about.
Okay, so you already had the the book deal signed before you even started writing the book. So you were able to start it.
They'd liked the book I'd written about the Pretenders.
Okay.
Which I'd done very quickly, but actually I'd had a lot of research in it. And the Beatles were the first group that I'd ever seen. You know, I'd been to see the Beatles end of April, I think it was 63.
Oh, wow.
Leeds Queen's Hall.
Excellent.
Co-bill topping with Acker Bilk and his Paramount Jazz Band. And I thought it was sensational. It really was the first gig I ever went to.
Wow.
And I went with my mate.
Right. So were you able to see them again after that, or was it just that one time?
No, that was the only time I ever saw them. But it was just before it went crazy, you know?
Okay.
So you could actually hear them, you know?
Gotcha.
Was people screaming.
Was this before or after the Profumo affair?
It's about that time.
Okay.
It was about then, because From Me to You was number one. It just come out.
Right.
So it's about that time.
Okay.
Interesting.
Why do you ask about the Profumo affair?
Because I lived in the UK for quite a while. I lived in Liverpool for 2 years, and my tutor over there always felt that the arrival of the Beatles was a nice masquerade over the over the Profumo affair. It drew the attention away from that scandal.
That's probably correct. I'd never really thought of that, and I'm interested in the Profumo affair because I knew Lucky Gordon, who was one of Christine Keeler's lovers, and in fact I wrote his obituary in the Guardian actually of 2 or 3 years ago. So I did have some knowledge of this, and also I've worked with Chris Blackwell, who then employed Lucky Gordon. Chris Blackwell, who had Island Records. Yeah, this is a completely off the thing. You did ask me.
No, it's fine. No, I just was curious. That was always an interesting angle that was explained to me, and that's why I was curious if you felt the same way.
It was all part of the same thing. Very significant, and the extent to which the Profumo affair rocked the country is probably underestimated. I mean, it really, you know, it changed things a lot, and the Beatles, the advent of the Beatles, probably was very significant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Gotcha. So
I love the Beatles. I thought the Beatles. One other reasons I went to write this book. I love the Beatles. You know, I think, in fact, a guy called Neil Spencer, who used to be the editor of the NME, came over to my place 9 days ago, and we were both talking about this and saying how the most perfect single, the most perfect 45 ever made, was Strawberry Fields Forever, backed with Penny Lane. I don't know if that's
absolutely.
It's the most perfect record ever made, you know, as far as I'm concerned.
But it didn't get to number one, did it?
Well, not in the UK, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, did you ever get to meet or interview McCartney before you started writing the biography?
No. But you see, I knew, and one of the reasons I wanted to write this was, I mean, obviously John Lennon's been killed, and John, this isn't to devalue John in any way at all, but John at that point, early 80s, is he's been given sainthood, really,
right?
Seen as the driving force in the Beatles. He was all the Beatles were, which I knew wasn't the case. You know, I knew from my experience, people I talked to in the music business, that actually the driving force in the Beatles was always Paul McCartney. He was the one who kept the whole thing going, you know?
Right.
And not in any way to denigrate John, but I felt things were not, it was not correct, what was being said. That was my motivating force in doing the book.
Gotcha. So you weren't able to, so writing the book then, you understood that it was Paul McCartney who was the driving force behind the Beatles, not necessarily John, but John did have a lot of, power earlier on, and it was Paul that really wanted the band to continue. So starting with the book, how long did it take you to write this?
Let me think. Well, the actual physical, books are in two parts because there's the
The
research
research, of course.
Right,
and then there's
right.
the physical writing. So I would say I did it relatively quickly.
Okay.
The actual writing, I think, took me about 5 months, maybe. But also, I'd probably spent 6 or 7 months on researching before that and talking to people, going up to Liverpool, for example. I
Okay.
quite a lot of interviews for the book.
Got you.
So it took me about a year.
Okay. Got you. Were
Um,
you able to interview any?
well, I was going to add, what key Liverpool people did you happen to interview when you were researching up that way?
Let me have a look. I can't even remember that, to be honest. I talked to a lot of Paul's teachers, for example.
Oh, okay.
Next door neighbor, Tom Gould, for example. I talked to, I'm just looking in the book actually to try and remember. It's quite a long time ago now. There's a celebrated promoter that I spoke to. I can't remember his name. Let me have a look. I'm just having a Bill Harry I spoke to, obviously.
Obviously,
Right.
yeah.
Who's the guy?
Bob Wooler or Alan Williams or any of the.
I spoke to Bob Wooler. I had a kind of, drunken night. Well, he was very drunk, as he often was. And Alan, I also spoke to, but briefly. They were, they were not very helpful. Those guys would be characterized as, they would be described to as kind of classic Liverpool drunks, and they sort of were a bit.
Yes.
Sam, his name, Sam, hang on. He was very good. Sam, God. Sorry, should have looked at, Jack Sweeney, his form master, was very good. But what's this Sam guy? Sam, do you know there's a guy called Sam? He was extremely good. I can picture him now.
Who was he? Where was he? Was he part of the cavern scene, or was he?
Yeah, part of that whole that era. And I spoke to Dorothy Roan, who was a girlfriend of Paul's. I'm looking for this guy, Sam Leach. Sam Leach.
Sam Leach, of course, yes.
Yeah, that was it. He was actually very good. And, people like Bob Wooler and Alan Williams were kind of all very disparaging of him. But actually, he had a very good perspective on the whole thing.
Gotcha.
I remember going around and talking to Pete Best's mum briefly.
Mona, yeah.
Not being able to find him. But there were. I did the kind of, the legwork really up in Liverpool for a week or so.
Sure.
And so some of the teachers were very good. Alan Durband, who was one of his main, Jack Sweeney, Alan Durband, these were teachers. I'm just looking through the book.
And they had to be towards the end of their career or retired by that point.
Yeah, they were. They were the teachers from the institute.
From the institute, right?
Institute, yeah.
Okay. You started off the book with talking about the death of his mother. I mean, which that one of the more important aspects of writing this book. Obviously you started with that. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, well, it was obvious that kind of like. Harold's Paul is about 12, isn't he, when this happens?
Yeah.
And obviously that's kind of going to be a traumatic experience, and it's going to be, something like that happens to you is going to sky forever, you know.
Sure.
And you know, it's like those lines, Mother Mary said to me, let it be, let it, you know, it keeps
Right.
coming back. You know, that's the last thing, the last Beatles single, really. And also, of course, the fact that John's mother died, you know, when he's, what, 16, isn't he, I think?
Mm-hmm.
This was one of the things that clearly, to me, bound them together, you know?
Right.
They had
Yeah.
that shared experience. You know, people didn't have, largely, you know, people's mums and dads didn't really die, you know?
So young and tragic like that,
So
right?
young and tragically, for both of them. I mean, I felt this was very, very important in bonding them together. And you know, they had a shared experience of pain.
Right.
Very important, that I thought, in their relationship.
Right. Another really cool aspect of the book was you did this. Mark Lewison ended up doing this for his first volume in his Beatles book. But you traced back the McCartney family some
Yeah.
decades.
Oh,
And
the
I thought that
lineage,
was
yeah.
really,
Went back to
the
about
really cool
1880, it looks like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I also think that's important. You know, I mean, I read a review of a journalist was talking about music books, and the early stuff, I always skip it right over. But to me, it's like that's the roots of the whole thing. I always
Right.
spend a lot of time on that, because I think then you find out about not only the person's background, his family, attitudes. It's all kind of comes together if you look at all that. I think it's important to do that.
Gotcha. And now, you know, the book is really Beatle heavy. You know, in the last bit, you know, some solo stuff. I mean, obviously, you were a big, huge Beatles fan. So did you have fun, you know, digging into that? Did you find out stuff that you never knew and you were surprised of Paul during that time, if you can remember?
The Beatles stuff, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, particularly the extent, although it's probably staring me in the face, but the extent to which Paul was like a mover and shaker in swinging London, which the other three Beatles weren't, because they didn't live in London.
Right.
You know, and Paul, you know, he installed himself in really the underground of London before John did, really.
Absolutely.
You know, he's involved. You know, he's. I mean, it's not just he's living in the centre of London. You know, he's involved with Barry Miles, for example. You know, and John Dunbar, the Indica Gallery.
John Page.
He's actually there, painting, decorating it. You know, I mean, that was one of the things I liked about Paul. He just muck in. You know, it's not like he's going to be a star about things. And, you know, even like things like, you know, Got to Get You Into My Life, which was about marijuana, to my astonishment. And also the extent to which Paul was the propagator for kind of legalization. You know, the advertisement in the Times newspaper in London, June, I think it is, June 1967. I mean, which is signed by over 60 dignitaries of all sorts.
Including the four Beatles
Paul,
and Brian.
And Brian, but it's Paul who pays for that. Paul is the instigator of that entire getting John Hopkins, an attempt to get John Hopkins out of jail. John Hopkins was one of the editors of International Times, which Barry Miles, as I knew him, also was. And, you know, he rather unwisely, you know, he'd been busted for the second time for possession of not a large amount of marijuana, but his, he's in court, instead of actually having a defense, he conducted his defense himself, and which was essentially, you know, a pro-marijuana rap, which of course doesn't go down very well with the jury. But anyway, he gets 9 months, I think it was. And Paul, you know, knew him, and he'd also organised the 14-hour Technicolor Dream, which was at Alexandra Palace, which was an important underground event it's like May, I think it's May, end of April or May, '67. And but Paul, you know, was prepared to, you know, put his money
Right.
behind this ad in the Times. It would have been expensive, but presumably he could afford it. So I kind of like that aspect of him. I thought Paul was the one who would come on TV.
Yeah.
I remember talking about, you know, how, you know, marijuana opened up your third eye, and, you know, I'd never heard of it. I mean, I'd never heard of your third eye at that point.
It's funny because you mentioned Got to Get You Into My Life and how it's about the marijuana, and it's funny because I've seen a lot of people write about that on Facebook and stuff, and how that song is now ruined for them just because of the whole marijuana aspect of it.
Why? It kind of, that's ridiculous. It kind of celebrates it even more, surely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they?
Yeah, and then that interview he does about taking acid too, you know, and how it's the reporter's responsibility to not report it, but he's going to tell about it because he wants to be honest, you know.
Yeah, I felt he was honest about all this as well, you know.
You know, he didn't hide it for sure.
Well, one of the things that I know that kind of cheesed off the other Beatles was the fact that he was one of the last ones to even dip his toe into the water with the drugs, and now he's on the television talking about it like an expert.
But that's Paul, you know, he's the Gemini communicator. You know, that's what he always was. He is, you know what I mean? It's like, he was described somewhat sarcastically as though the PR man of the group. But it's not. That's just his natural forte, you know? He would probably have been quite good as a journalist himself, you know? I mean, he did English. He passed English literature at A-level at school. Right. But he is the natural communicator. That's one of the things about Paul. That's why he's the great PR man. Top, but he's also he's a great PR man, you know, and it's pretty honest. And whereas a lot of PR men are not particularly honest, some anyway, right? You know, Paul was honest, perhaps too honest for his own good. Right. Know? And I like that, you know, I thought it was, and also, listen, people, also another reason I wanted to write this, like during the 70s, people like the serious critics, like some I worked with, are all hating everything he does.
Yep.
And, you know, deifying everything John does. And I knew this was absolute nonsense.
Crap.
I mean, obviously, Band on the Run is a fantastic album. There's loads of fantastic stuff. You know, Maybe I'm Amazed, magnificent. You know, and I'd seen that show. I saw the show I was in Los Angeles in '76. Oh, wow. When he did that big, you know, the big tour with Wings. Right. Wings over. Although it was at the Forum, I remember.
Yes.
And although, you know, I had doubts about some of it, it was pretty fantastic, you know. It was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, well, the bias against McCartney in the press, especially in the UK and in America, was just largely unfair and rooted in the breakup of the Beatles and vilifying him as the villain.
Exactly.
For breaking it up, and they did not view his work fairly as they did with John, and I think that's one of the greatest crimes, really, over the last 50 years of his career. Now it's fashionable to say that this music is great. But back then they didn't.
I know, but listen, and it was like I'd left the NME, and I kind of felt that it had become very pretentious at times, to be honest. And almost subconsciously, I've now realized, writing that book was a way of stating, this is all behind me. I'm not interested in, you know, in your sort of petty little tribal wars. Okay. And, you know, there is someone I know, I won't say his name, who when I wrote the McCartney book, it came out, sort of sneered at me saying, how could you spend all that time writing a book about such a boring person? So take a running jump, really. You know, have a look at yourself, please. Come on. wonderful. And there was there certainly was a tray in the NME to kind of just sneer at everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to get the cheap laugh, to sneer and get the cheap laugh. But, there certainly was a time in my life when I, very quickly I thought, no, it's exactly that. It's the cheap laugh, and it's not going to enhance you or anyone in any way. And actually, I remember being in the yard, the studio yard of Lee Scratch Perry, who of course had worked with Paul in Jamaica, and been saying, "Positive, man, you have to be positive, positive." And I remember thinking, "Oh, that sounds a good idea. I think I'll be that." Instead of being, the cynical little hack. I'd rather be that. It seems a better idea to me. So that's another reason that I wanted to write the book, because I just knew it was ridiculous the way Paul had been treated. And I know when my name was put up to do the interview for that first edition of Q.
We're going to talk about that next.
The PR guy, whoever the PR guy was doing Paul, Tony Brainsbury, was it? I can't remember. Because it wasn't said to me, it said to Mark Allen, the editor. Mark said, "Oh, he's written a book about Paul," and he was very nervous because all anyone did was slag Paul off.
Right.
And Mark had read the book. Mark had read the book. Says, "No, it's not that at all."
So the book was out. So the book was out then prior to interviewing Paul McCartney for the Q magazine.
by about a second.
Okay.
Probably, maybe not even out, but there were copies, there were review copies perhaps around. I can't quite. I think it's about the same time the Q interview.
Right. So then now the message is getting relayed to Paul that this is a more favorable bio on him than before the interview.
Yeah. Apparently, yeah.
Right. So now let's talk about this first. That interview now. This is specific. Now is this specifically for the launch of Q magazine for this interview?
Yeah.
I know it's been a long time, so if you can remember.
I can't remember too much, man.
Right. But the thing
up there online.
Early on in the interview, you talk about how you liked his latest album, Press to Play. And all of a sudden, it just seemed like after that, he was just willing to pour his heart out to you. But do you remember Press to Play, and you remember liking it?
Yeah. And I'd actually been to see him do. Maybe he wanted to check me out or something, but a few days before, he'd been doing something at the BBC with regard to it. Okay. And I'd been there, and I'd been up there, and I introduced myself afterwards. But what I noted about that interview, he's just like straight into it.
Right.
I mean, straight into it. There's no faffing around. Would you like a cup of tea or anything? It's in his offices in Soho Square.
Right.
And very tasteful, as you would expect. And we're just straight into it. It's like a rap,
Right. It just seemed like it was you weren't even really trying to get all this information out of him. He was just pouring it out.
No, yeah.
So did he did he know that this was being recorded?
Yeah.
Okay. Because because it's just the fact that he's just so open, and then being recorded, you would think maybe he would speak a little more carefully, while you're being recorded.
He was great. He was great.
No, I mean this interview is excellent. It also reminds me of another one from 1980, the McCartney interview with Vic Garbarini for the Musician magazine.
Okay, Vic's a friend of mine. Yeah. Yeah.
So I've had the opportunity to talk to Vic about this, and I mean again, he was just like really. He had a game plan of what he wanted to do, but he was surprised with just how much he was just letting go,
letting his guard down. Yeah,
letting his guard down. Really,
I know. I was. I was going to say I was surprised. I wasn't really, because it
Okay.
seemed a very natural situation. It was just very conversational. It was just like, you know, he could have been any music. He wasn't like, this is a superstar, Paul McCartney.
No, very
Right.
down to earth.
And I tended not to see things like that anyway, because it doesn't help, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I would always try not to be impressed with situations like that
Right.
professionally. You know what I mean? It makes it easier if you're not. But with him, I didn't even have to think like that. It was just like, I remember he just came into the room and straight away sits down like, boom, 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 boom. Straight away.
Right.
Excellent.
Excellent.
It made me really like him, obviously.
Uh-huh. That's great. I mean, things that I was really surprised that, I mean, he seemed aware of of knowing what he did to piss the other three off. I mean, he seemed aware that, you know, breaking or announcing the Beatles breakup was going to piss off with John. He knew, you know, pissing off George by not letting him, you know, play guitar on between every verse of Hey Jude, and, you know, pissing off Ringo for playing Back to the USR. I mean, he just seems so aware, you know, of this stuff. And then talking so candid about Yoko too. I mean, one of the things that the stories about that he tells during your interview is about, you know, her wanting to see him, but then she ended up being too busy to see him. Like, that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and then
I think he was just completely candid, and I think he was. Paul's a really perceptive bloke. You know, he would have seen what was going on with the other Beatles. You know, how difficult it was working with them.
right.
I mean, I don't know if I should. Yeah, I will say this. You know, I interviewed George. I interviewed George about 3 years later.
Okay.
And I was surprised at how sort of, you know, he just seemed a bit small-minded, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of sarcastic and a bit bitter, actually.
Yeah, but
Right.
George always kind of was, you know, he always was very bitter in those he seemed very bitter there for a period there in the 1980s.
I mean, it's like, come on, get over it, mate. Like, I mean, that was the period. I can't remember if he said this to me, but like, oh, I'd rather not have been in the Beatles. That's the way you think he's thinking.
Come
But, you
on.
know,
Right.
get over it, man.
Get over it.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know what? It's better than being whatever you're going to be in Liverpool, electrician in Liverpool. Come off it, you know. But it's sarcastic and a little bit snide and petty. I was actually very disappointed.
Right.
That encounter with George.
That's disappointing, really.
You know, because I thought they're all great. You know.
Right.
This one didn't seem so good. You know.
The other cool thing in this interview too is talking to him about the whole, you know, it's a drag comment, you know, after the death of Lennon, and how you're, you know, pretty much understanding what he meant by that, and he totally felt comfortable with that with you.
This is understatement. It's classic understatement. It's also probably very English in a way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not wanting to kind of bear your heart on your sleeve. I mean,
And
know,
that
it's
gets
the same as the remarks about his mum, you know, where he's supposed to said, you know, what are we going to do without her money? It's
right.
This is not an indication that this is someone who is a hugely materialistic person. It's
No.
someone, a child in trauma, you know, saying, you know, saying that awkward thing that kids in such a state say, you know.
And I think a lot of this too is a lot gets lost in translation between American and English vernacular. People, what's accepted in print in England, people in America just sometimes take it and run with it because
listen, in England they don't get it either. You know what I mean? In England they don't get it either. It's not just. I don't think it's just a you know, a transatlantic misunderstanding. A lot of people in this country wouldn't get it also, but I was just trying to look a bit deeper into it. I'm not kind of like bigging myself up in any way that way, but I'm just trying to see what's he really saying here. It's a drag. Yeah, that's classic understatement, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not like I don't care, which is sort of which it was translated as being by some people, obviously.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Were you aware of, so how does this come out on I would imagine it's a bootleg picture disc. I mean, were you aware of this happening?
I can't remember what happened actually.
Well, you recorded it obviously with your own equipment, and then
Yeah,
it's some
I think someone may have bought it from me. I probably shouldn't have sold it. I don't know.
Ah,
I don't
okay.
think I knew this was going to happen. I think there was someone who was buying interview cassettes, and I'd sold them 2 or 3.
yeah.
You know, it didn't seem, and I don't think I knew what was going on at the time. I remember it was a very fast pace in my life at that point.
Yeah, I did read
I
that.
don't-
I read that MPL tried to block the release of this picture disc. Do you know if that's accurate or true?
I've never even seen this. You know, is it a picture disc?
Yeah, I
It
mean, if we
is.
can want to turn on the camera real quick, I can show him.
Yeah, I'll just turn your camera on, Tom. Hold on.
Right.
Okay.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, hold on. Go ahead, Tom. Start your
I gotta
enable,
start the
enable your
video.
video. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, can you see, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one side,
Oh wow.
and then
Okay.
there's the other side.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, so
Okay.
this is up on YouTube. Friend of the show, Adrian, he posted this
Okay.
up on YouTube about 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
So I mean, it can be heard.
I'll have to have a listen. I'll have to listen.
Yeah, we'll pass the link. We'll pass the link on to you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I can't remember I really can't remember the details, but I do remember running into Paul, you know, a few years later, and saying, "Look, if any, you know, nonsense went on over that, I apologise. I don't think I realised what was going on. You know, I didn't know they tried to stop its release, by the way.
Right.
And he was, of course, Paul was cool and handed me a spliff. You know what I mean? As he would, really.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it seems like after this interview, he was never really, as candid
No.
before, or since then. I mean, I would imagine that, maybe then after this or after the release of this interview, maybe he started to, bring his guard down a little bit and just seem to be more careful with what he says after that.
I can't. I mean, I'm not sure. I generally enjoy reading Paul McCartney interviews or seeing him being interviewed. But I think he was responding to the book,
Gotcha.
That it was kind of, because it kind of was it's like Hitler, my part in his downfall. I'm not trying to make my role too large in this, but part of my intention was to state that it wasn't quite accurate what was being said about his position.
Right. And I think that's great. It needed to be said. He can't fight that war himself.
That's what I thought I could. That's the various levels of why you're writing a book, but that was kind of like the central thrust. I know I have a story here,
right,
that is not being said.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people at that time weren't aware of his involvement of the flutes, the whatchamacallit on Strawberry Fields, the Mellotron, right? Is that what it's called, Andy?
Yes, the Mellotron.
Yeah, Mellotron. I mean, people weren't aware of how involved he was in songs like A Day in the Life or doing the tape loops for Tomorrow Never Knows. I mean, a lot of this stuff just came out after the fact, and he wasn't defending himself at all, really.
I mean, the fact is, Paul is a consummate artist, just as much as, John is seeing as, the artist Beatle, but Paul is just as much an artist.
Absolutely.
Just as much. Paul was, I mean, when the Quarrymen or then it became Johnny and the Moondogs, I mean, Paul would be designing the posters, not John.
Right.
Because he'd done A-level art. In fact, he had a higher grade in art than John did, actually.
Yeah.
You talked about meeting Paul after this. Were you able to interview him again after this?
No, I didn't really. I didn't sort of want to really.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose I could have done that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there are a lot of people a lot of journalists, music journalists, kind of keep interviewing the same person,
Right.
And largely speaking, I didn't do that because to me it's like I was looking for the kind of the story is there,
Right.
and then, but I've done that. I don't want to do that again, largely.
Right.
That time I ran into him, it was at I think it was Wayne's World
Mm,
premiere party. It was at the Hard Rock Cafe in London.
okay.
Was there a Wayne's World? There was a Wayne's World 2, wasn't there?
Right. Yep. There was.
Was there a I
Yep.
think it was Wayne's World 2, actually.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And I just had a great time with it. You know what I mean? I went up and introduced, said, "Oh, I'm Chris Salewicz. I haven't seen you for 10 years, blah, blah, blah."
Right.
Linda, I noticed Linda tried to stand in front of him as though that was her job to protect him,
Right.
But then when I said my name, she was sort of stepped back.
Okay.
And then we went and sat down at a table and, had a ting and ting, as we say.
Right. Do you recall who came in at the end of the interview to Paul, and Paul was like, "Well, okay, well, I guess we did have gone a bit long." Do you recall who that was that came in the office?
No, not a clue.
Okay. Well, it's a fascinating interview. I think you did a splendid job. I mean, did you have any game plan going in on that interview? I mean, did you have a bunch
I'm
of
sure
questions?
I did. No. Look, I would prepare.
Right.
I'm quite good at preparing for interviews. I mean, I don't do so many these days, but I would have had a notebook with questions with me. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Gotcha.
But I think that he kind of controlled it with just what I think he just started. I can't remember what the first thing he said to me was, but he just kind of took the lead. It's like, this is what I want to say, almost,
Right.
He might have just been in the mood to say, you know what, I'm feeling kind of open today, and this is what I'm going to say.
It was a great day, I remember that. It was like very up. It was like, his energy seemed very positive.
Right. He talks about it, and he talks about how he was working on a remix for one of the singles on Press to Play at the beginning of your interview. Which is pretty. So he was obviously feeling very up and productive, and obviously we know that the critical panning of Press to Play was going to come, which wasn't great. But I mean, he was in the middle of the promoting his album, so he was in good spirits.
Yeah. No. It was like it was a great day. He had great energy. It seemed like we were quite simpatico. I suppose we would be. I've been studying him for the last 2 years or so. I mean, I was primed.
Right. One of the things that you talked to him about in the interview, which I'm kind of fascinated by, because sometimes it's hard to ask like a tough question because you don't know what kind of reaction you're going to get. But you ask him something about Yoko still being on methadone or methadone, however you pronounce it. I mean, is questions like that, like tough questions, that like easy for you to do?
I just thought it was part of the job, really.
Yeah.
To be honest, I mean, they're not that hard, no.
Okay.
Because that's the question, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's the sort of gig. You're supposed to be finding things out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
One of my favorite parts of the entire interview is him talking about how he really was the one that kind of spoke to Yoko and John about getting them back together again, and then how he candidly tells you, well, you're not going to see that printed anywhere because that's
and you don't.
They don't want that out there. But there he is telling you, in person. This is Yoko came to see me. I went to go see John, and and then boom, they're back together. And then of course officially that's not what got told. And he tells you, hey, you're not going to see that printed anywhere.
yeah. I know. I remember that.
So obviously we got the announcement for a few months back about Q Magazine shutting down.
About less than a few months, about 6 weeks, about a month ago, isn't it? Almost.
Yeah, well, it seemed like a couple. Maybe time's just going by quicker for me.
No, it was just now. It was just now. I think it's about a month, actually.
Yeah, I mean, talk about your involvement with Q. I mean, how much other stuff did you do for Q Magazine?
Well, I worked on the first few editions largely, because I then went to work on MTV Europe, which set up. I had a show on MTV Europe, and but I knew the person I knew there. Well, it was two editors, Mark Ellen and David Hepworth, And I'd always thought that Mark was very talented, and he'd done stuff for the NME, and I'd always tried to get him, you know, I was commissioning stuff, a little bit of stuff, and would always get him to write stuff. And I thought he was talented, but hadn't fit in, you know. I think someone said, well, Mark Allen didn't have the right haircut for the NME. But I knew he was talented. And I liked his energy, and he was funny, which is something that I always appreciate about people. So I thought this, and also I could tell the days, you know, that's one of the reasons I left the NME. You could feel its time was over, you know, that already the face had started. One of the reasons I left the NME was because I started to do stuff for the Face magazine. And one of the editors at the NME told me, oh, you can't write for us if you're doing stuff for that. So, okay, fuck off, you know, basically. You know. It was a new time. It was the 80s. And I liked, you know, as I said, I mentioned I knew Vic Garbarini, and I like those American magazines like Musician, which seemed to have a larger agenda of what you could write about, you know. I mean, everyone says that Q's success was built on, you know, the arrival of the CD market. I probably that's the case, but I wasn't really aware of that. And it just seemed like it was you know, I liked the shape of it, you know, the design, and the content, and it was relatively intelligent, you know. It was quite intelligent, and was quite funny as well, you know.
Right.
So I think that's why it was obvious why it was going to be successful. And you know, again, I can remember sort of, you know, again, I won't mention his name, but you know, a PR guy in a record company who considered himself very hip, always a kiss of death, you know. Always a warning. I remember saying, well, I can't imagine who's going to read this. And I think it was bloody obvious, mate. There's a market waiting there for it, you know. It's you know, because, you know, the people, I'm sorry, you know, the NME was too much about, it seemed to me too much about shoegazing, you know, kind of Manchester groups. In overcoats, which just weren't very interesting. But there was lots of other interesting stuff going on out there, always, you know. And I had a lot of respect for Q. I thought it was a good idea. I'm sorry, and I'm very sorry to hear it's gone under. Although I can't pretend to have read an issue cover to cover for some years, I must admit.
Do you remember so you pretty much just worked on the initial first couple episodes and that was it?
I did a big piece,
or issues, sorry.
Issues. I did a big piece similar to the Paul interview with Elton John.
Oh, cool.
Which I remember I went to LA to do that. That's probably about 3 episodes later. I did a bit of stuff. I mean, for example, in that first edition, I have not only the McCartney, because they'd have 2 or 3 images on the front cover. And so I did the Macca interview, but I also did Big Audio Dynamite's second album, produced by Joe, you know, co-produced by Joe Strummer, back writing songs, Will the Clash Get Back Together? You know, I did those 2 stories in the first one.
Gotcha. And so afterwards, I mean, come the 80s, I mean, your goal is more biographies and books at the time, though. So is that your more of your thought process is to switching over to books?
Yeah, it was really, because I could tell. I had that time I had a couple of years at MTV where I had a film program called Kino, Kino, which was great. But it made me step away from journalism. And I did a bit of, you know, I did after the MTV gig ends, because, you know, they were cutting costs and my program cost the most. of anyone to make, and I had the best deal anyway. But then I did things like, I did the El Salvador Civil War, for example, for the Sunday Correspondent, and I was a couple of medical stories in Africa and China. I was kind of, but those papers were declining, and the Sunday Correspondent, for which I did those stories, just went under suddenly. And
wow.
I could sniff the wind, of what we see happening now. Really, I could tell something was going to go wrong with print journalism. I didn't know what it was, but I could tell, because I knew that, for example, in the 1980s, about the middle of the decade, the marketing men and accountants seemed to take over.
Okay.
On say the daily newspapers, Sunday newspapers, and I was uncomfortable about the way it was going, and so I decided, and I was trying to write film scripts as well, which I did do. I was a Chris Blackwell, who started Island Records, his house with a guy called Don Letts, who was in fact been in Big Audio Dynamite in 1994, and he said, I've got a really good idea. We're sitting out on the lawn, in the summer.
Right.
So I've got a good idea. We always talk about Jamaica as being a natural film set, which we had taught. Why don't you two go down there and see if we can start a low-budget film industry? So obviously we thought, well, that's a terrible idea. Why on earth would I want to do that? So we did do that, and we got a couple of films out of it. Don directed a film called Dancehall Queen, and I co-wrote this film called Third World Cop, which was a huge hit, in the Caribbean and the black market as well. And so I've done a bit of that ever since. I was doing a lot of these things just fall to bits, though. Film is tricky, but I was doing The Harder They Come 2 at one point.
A sequel to The Harder They Come?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Because I like that movie. I mean, I'm not the biggest reggae fan, but I actually enjoy with Jimmy Cliff. I actually enjoy that film.
Fantastic film. I was doing a Peter Tosh biopic at one point. All these things they fall into black holes. It's really easy for things to fall back and I've done quite a lot of things like that. So I thought I'd do books. I remember I sat on a beach in Sydney, Australia, having a slight crisis about this. All these newspapers. I'd also worked on a Time Out. The Sunday Correspondent went under, and I'd also worked on, and was about to be made editor of this Time Out subsidiary magazine, an arts magazine, a monthly arts magazine called 2020. Okay. And which, funnily enough, we seem to be in that year now, don't we?
Yeah.
The year when we have no clarity of vision whatsoever.
No, none.
But that had gone. I go on holiday. I'm coming back to be the editor. Oh, it's folded. Okay, because it's that was that recession. And so I sat on this beach in Sydney, and I thought, what am I going to do? I think I've written a couple of books, 3 books by that time, because I'd also done one with Billy Bragg, where we'd done a tour of the Soviet Union.
Oh, wow.
Which was a fairly amazing experience, actually, at the time of the peak of perestroika. So it's like, this was November, December 87. So I'd done that. I'd done 3 books at that point. I thought, well, I can do this. Seem to be okay at this. And I quite like doing it as well, It's a bit of a lonely gig, but I thought I can do this, and I can do the film thing, I think, at that point, which I did manage. That's what I want to do, and I'll occasionally write articles. I didn't want to look. I guess towards the end of the NME, or the end of maybe the Face or so, but early 80s, I remember interviewing. Might have been one of Duran actually. thinking, I shouldn't be interviewing you. You should be interviewing me, because I know lots more than you. I know lots more than you. So it just seemed pointless, Why, they were when they're kids,
Right.
So why should they know? But I'm wasting my time here, you know. And so, you know, I worked on the Sunday Times magazine where I would write write stuff about, you know, housing projects in Scotland or time out or things, loose sniffing gangs. I was doing more interesting stuff, I thought, really, you know.
Right.
And I didn't really want to go and interview too many musicians, actually. Oh, occasionally I would, you know.
Right.
But they'd have to interest me very much.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Hey, Chris, going back to the book, really, just on talking about the different issues, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I mean, Tom's got an issue of the book. I think it's a hardcover. I have a soft cover with an alternative cover. Were you kind of given any input on artwork or design or anything like that?
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't at all, actually. I mean, I was very new to it then. Now I would have had, you know, but I thought the hardback St. Martin's Press cover was really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got that. He's got like a
That's
pink shirt on. Yeah.
Pink tinge. Yeah. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I was just curious if you as the author would be consulted on that, which you know, it's a pity you weren't, but those decisions were kind of taken out of your hand.
Nowadays, I would know how to do that, but then I didn't really.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But actually, I thought the St. Martin's cover was really good.
Yeah, it's a nice touch, that cover. It really is.
You know, sometimes people come up with stuff you don't expect. For example, my Jimmy Page biography, which is like my most recent book.
Right.
I've just got the Japanese edition.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic! It's fantastic.
The cover.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it looks. See if you can find it online. It's pink. You know, Jimmy Page playing a pink suit. It's got also those Japanese kind of text all over it. And actually, the McCartney book came out in Japan as well. I can't remember.
Oh, nice.
I can't remember what the cover is. And what else has come out? Bob Marley.
Right. Then you did one on one of the members of the Clash too. Was it Strummer?
Joe Strummer. Yeah, that came out in Japan.
Can you talk a little bit about the business end? Go ahead.
Of what? How do you mean?
No. In the business, so you write these books. Do you get like like an advance and afterwards? Are you making money on the sales of the book as well?
Yeah. That's basically what's supposed to happen anyway.
Okay. Well, so you just never know how publishing goes and stuff, but it's nice to see if you can make a few quid from it.
No. I mean, the advances aren't as good as they used to be. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if it was kind of like a musician when they get publishing rights that they keep on making money, when like songs are played on the radio or whatnot. And I just didn't know if there was something like that for writers as well, like for copies sold or especially when there's another pressing of the book is.
Yeah, no. You keep going, basically. I mean, so long as you've paid off your advance.
Okay, gotcha.
Which hopefully you will.
Gotcha.
I mean,
right. So
sometimes it's worth doing a deal without much of an advance, knowing that you'll get royalties straight away, virtually.
Cool. Okay, gotcha. That's good to know. What are you working on anything now?
Yeah, I am, but I don't want to tell you about it.
Yes.
All right. Well, listen. When the time is right, tell us, and we'll push it for you.
Yeah. So are you still enjoying writing?
Yeah. Of course, that's what I do, basically.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I do. There's a couple of things I'm working on at the moment, but I can't. I'm superstitious. I think you can talk stuff out,
Right.
Yeah.
You don't, and then you've talked about it enough, and you don't have to. I don't have to write it down. I've talked to everyone about it. So
right.
I can't really talk about things until I've.
No, that's understandable. I was just trying to see if there was anything we could help you plug at the moment.
No. I'll let you know. I'll certainly let you know. Thanks very much. Where are you guys, by the way?
Well,
where are you?
Go ahead, Andy.
I'm in New Jersey, about 30 minutes from New York City, so I'm on the East Coast.
Okay.
And then I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, so I'm on the West Coast.
Oh, right, over there. Okay, wow. So it's quite early for you.
Yeah, yeah, but that's fine. I'm usually up early anyway, so. But
Good, me too. The early bird gets the worm.
yeah, that's what they say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Chris, for your time. This was really enjoyable. I mean, you answered a lot. I mean, for me, there wasn't really a lot known about, the behind the scenes for the book and the interview you did. So thank you for answering these
Oh,
questions.
thank you. It's not every
Very
day that
informative.
two guys, two Yanks, can talk to a gentleman who have met Paul McCartney and George Harrison. So thank you.
I met Ringo as well, actually.
Oh, great.
That's the story.
Well, even better.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks
Yes.
very much indeed.
Yeah,
Hey, Chris, we'll send you this when this is all done and published and edited. We'll send you the link so you can watch it and listen to it. And
please. Yeah.
I'll also send you the link to the video which has your interview with Paul on it as well. I'll send you that as well.
Yeah. Thanks very much indeed. I would love to hear that. I'd love to hear that.
Will do. Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Thanks. Have a lovely day.
You
as
too,
well.
Chris.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
You guys enjoy it. Bye.
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 All right, and that was our interview with Chris Salewicz. I gotta make sure I say that right because I was up the night before.
I always thought it was Salewicz, but okay.
Yeah. So I was up the night before looking up interviews with him on YouTube, and everybody was just screwing up his
Butchering
name.
the name.
Yeah, butchering the name, kind of like how they do with my name.
Oh God.
Yeah, but man, damn it! But that was great. I mean, I went in not expecting him to remember everything because this happened
Over 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I still think it's important to interview those people too.
Yeah, because again, yeah,
it presents itself. Because I mean, like you said, before we hung up, I mean, it's not every day you get to talk to somebody that actually got to interview McCartney.
Yeah, it doesn't happen every day. You get to interview people that have met three Beatles. I mean, that's pretty significant.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. So he's a good guy, and that was a good score for us. So it was a good show.
Yeah, I think so too. I think hopefully everybody will appreciate for what it is. And,
And if you haven't gotten his book, I'm sure you can get it secondhand pretty cheap. As Tom mentioned, it is very Beatle heavy. It's probably 80% Beatles, 20% solo, which has been a gripe of ours with McCartney books, and that's going to be a future show for us in a few weeks. We're going to do a show just on McCartney books, and we'll see how the landscape of McCartney books has changed, or how it started and how it's gone now. So, but again, this is it's an early pioneer of his biography. It's a good one, and again, as you pointed out, he covers the early, and again, obviously, that was interesting to me, the Liverpool aspect, and he covers the McCartney genealogy very well, not to the Lewison extent, but that's
Yeah, no, and that was huge. I mean, I would think that Lewison maybe got the idea from this sub book. So I mean, it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great aspect, and like you said, I mean, it's a great way to understand, the person and their history,
the lineage. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. So great, another good one. Thank you, Andy. We're going to let's talk about where we are and everything. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Two Legs Podcast. You can email us at twolegspodcast@gmail.com. Please check us out on YouTube. That's Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. If you like what you see, please subscribe. We're picking up, seems like we're picking up more and more subscribers every day. So thank you for that. We love the comments. We always look at the comments, and we try to respond when we can. So in that aspect, please keep those coming. The emails are great as well. So thank you very much. What else is there? Spotify. I'm sorry, not Spotify, but
not yet. We're gonna look into that.
iTunes, iHeartRadio. We're there. Yeah, we're looking to that, and then obviously. We got a lot to come. Next week, we're going to record again. We got a returning guest, Ted Montgomery, coming on, and we're going to talk about the McCartney that they did together throughout the 70s. And that should be another good time.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
discussion.
good shows coming out on the pipeline, and then taking us well through August and into September.
Yeah, we got some, hopefully a surprise crossover in the works. Come September, we got a lot of good shows, a lot of discoveries that have been popping up that we're going to be talking about as well. I'm sure at some point we want to get into that McCartney interview from what the British GQ. I mean, there's some interesting stuff on there that maybe we can talk about.
Yeah, we can touch upon that maybe in a news segment or something.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we'll check that out too. So, actually, Andy, anything you want to add before we sign off?
No. Thanks again for everybody tuning in and the comments and the YouTube channel. I think we're up to 162 subscribers, so please keep on. We want to get to that 200 magic number, so keep going.
Right. Keep going. Thank you. Okay, so everybody out there, thank you again. Take care. As always, have a great day and a beautiful night. See ya.
Listening to Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, hosted by Tom Hunyadi and Andy Nichols, with musical contributions by Dylan C.